Will Elizabeth Holmes speak at her sentencing? So I'm going to talk about what happens at the sentencing. I'm going to talk about the pre-sentence report, what's in it and what's not. And I'm also going to give you the 7 factors that the judge considers when sentencing a defendant. So hi there, I'm Michele Hagan. I'm a legal analyst and a former prosecutor. You may recognize me because I provided a lot of legal analysis on the Elizabeth Holmes case, as well as the Sunny Balwani. Done a ton of videos calculating the sentence. So go ahead and take a look at those videos. So this video is for education and information purposes. Simply my opinion, my analysis, and I want to know what's your analysis. So please do leave a comment or question. Please share these videos. Please hit that like button. And thanks again to all of those of you who subscribe to this channel. I appreciate your continued support. And please do support my work by subscribing. And if you want to contribute to me making these videos, I'll put a PayPal link in the description box below the video. Okay, so her sentencing, Elizabeth Holmes will be sentenced on November 18th. So I'm going to give you a little background information here. I'm going to explain the process, what happens regarding the pre-sentence report, what happens at the hearing, at the sentencing, I should say, and whether or not I think Elizabeth Holmes will speak at the hearing or not. Okay, so in January 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was convicted of 4 counts of wire fraud. She started a blood testing company called Theranos. She was the CEO, and Sunny Balwani, who was a co-defendant, but they were tried separately, he was the COO. He was convicted of all 12 counts. She was convicted on 4 counts. 1 count of conspiring with Sunny Balwani to defraud investors, and 3 counts for defrauding individual investors to the tune of approximately $144 million or more. We'll see. Okay, so as I said, her sentencing is on November 18th, and I want to say thank you to all of those of you who submitted questions that I'm going to be answering in this video. And also, I posted 2 polls on the community page. One is, what do you think Elizabeth Holmes' sentence is going to be? So please do cast your vote. And I did another poll that I'd like your feedback, your input, your analysis on whether or not a private company can provide a free speech platform when it's a for-profit business. That's an interesting question. Okay, so let's get back to Elizabeth Holmes. So, sentencing again, November 18th. So what's the process here? So when a defendant gets convicted, it's sent to the United States Probation Department, and a probation officer is assigned, and that probation officer gathers all the information and makes a sentence recommendation to the judge. They also put together, he or she puts together, what's called a pre-sentence report. Okay, and I'm going to talk about what's in the pre-sentence report and what's not, and then I'm also going to get to your questions, and we're going to talk about the 7 factors the judge considers. Okay, so I have a bunch of notes here that I have to refer to because it's almost Friday. All right, so what's in the pre-sentence report? They're going to do a calculation of the defendant's offense level. And if you look at the videos I've done many of them on calculating Elizabeth Holmes' sentence, factors that will reduce, factors that will increase her sentence possibly. But when you're dealing with a wire fraud, okay, it was an exchange of money based on misrepresentations, okay? So they are going to make, in the pre-sentence report, there will be a recommendation as to what the offense level. So we know that the offense level is level 7, or at least I know that. It's level 7 for fraud, and they're going to look at whether or not Elizabeth Holmes has a criminal history. I don't think she does, but we'll see. They also will state the resulting sentence range. So remember how I've been telling you that the United States federal sentencing guidelines are advisory. They used to be mandatory, but they're advisory. But in this pre-sentence report, they will indicate what the sentencing range could be. If you look at the videos, I was looking at anywhere from a range of 31 to 35. We'll see, okay? So again, please do look at how I calculated the sentence. So, resulting sentencing range, the kinds of sentences available. Does she qualify for home detention? She doesn't, okay, in my opinion, because the offense level is too high, okay? But again, the judge makes the decision. It's at the judge's discretion on what the sentence will be, okay? So they will also identify any factor relevant to the appropriate kind of sentence. Now, does the fact that she's pregnant or a new mom matter? Well, I'll get to that. I'll answer that question. And they also indicate the basis for departing. So what are the reasons to depart from the sentencing range? They'll also indicate that in the pre-sentence report. The pre-sentence report also has to contain the following information. It must contain the following information. 1, the defendant's history and characteristics, including any prior criminal record, the defendant's financial condition, and any circumstances affecting the defendant's behavior that may be helpful in imposing the sentence or in correctional treatment. Information that assesses any financial, social, psychological, and medical impact on any victim. Now, that's where Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz can come in, or Adam Rosendorf, regarding what happened to them. Remember the whole whistleblower video I did? And whether or not Elizabeth Holmes threatened Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz. You can go ahead and take a look at those videos. Also, the court considers the nature and the extent of other non-prison resources out there. Maybe drug rehab. I don't know that that's involved in any of this, but that's just something to consider, the judge would consider. Also, regarding restitution, what would be the appropriate amount of restitution? So the probation officer gathers all that information from the investors of the approximately 144 million or more that was defrauded from these investors. The court also considers any other matters that the court considers important. So say, for instance, a judge may say that the defendant needs to have a psychological evaluation, or an assessment of a drug addiction or any addiction issue. I don't know that that's relevant at this, but it's just something that the judge could consider. What's not in the pre-sentence report? Any confidential information. That's not in the pre-sentence report. Let me see what else. There will also be victim impact statements, right, from these investors who were defrauded, as well as other investors. And if you take a look at, and the patients, by the way, if you take a look at the video I did, it was Elizabeth Holmes could get the same sentence of Sunny Balwani. I talked about the loss amount. The conduct that the court can consider includes not only charged counts, but also uncharged counts, which would include those 4 patient counts she was acquitted on, and the 3 other investor counts that the jury was undecided. The court can consider that in assessing what the appropriate sentence would be. So will there be statements they're called victim impact statements? Will there be any statements by these victims? Okay, and then, as I said, the probation officer will make a separate sentence recommendation to the court. Whether or not that's released to the parties, that's up to the judge, all right? So let's see. My other notes here are, what happens at the sentencing? Who can speak? Will Elizabeth Holmes be speaking? And I'll address that at the end. What my guess would be. What do you think? Do you think she's going to speak at the hearing? And if so, or if not, tell me why yes or why no. All right. So the court also has to make a determination at the hearing if there's any parts of the sentencing report that either side objects to, and if it wasn't resolved with the probation officer, because there's a period of time which both sides can file objections with regarding the probation, as I should say, what's in the pre-sentence report, right? They can file those objections, and then the probation officer may, make an attempt to resolve those objections, or they can just indicate in the pre-sentence report that the parties are objecting to whatever they're objecting to, and then at the hearing, at the sentencing, the judge will make a determination on how to resolve any of those disputed items. Okay, so who can speak at the hearing? Who can speak? Well, let me tell you. At the hearing, at the sentencing, the court must provide the defendant's attorney an opportunity to speak on the defendant's behalf, must also address the defendant. That means speak personally to Elizabeth Holmes in order to permit her to speak. She has an opportunity to speak at the sentencing, or present any information to mitigate the sentence, and provide the government an opportunity to speak as well. Okay? And guess who else? The victims also have an opportunity to speak. So before imposing a sentence, the court must address any victim of the crime who is present at the sentencing, and must permit the victim to be reasonably heard. Now, the pre-sentence report can already contain those statements made by the victim. They're allowed to submit what happened, how much money they were defrauded, what happened regarding the offenses, how that impacted them. They're allowed to file a statement, have that included in the pre-sentence report, as well as they're allowed to address the court at the sentencing. Okay? The other thing that happens at the sentencing is that the defendant will also be told by the judge of their right to file an appeal. So the court must advise the defendant of the right to appeal their conviction. So Elizabeth Holmes, like any defendant, has a right to appeal, and that would be the next step, okay, would be the appeal. And I'll get to your questions because one of them is pretty interesting. So what happens as the pre-sentence report, as the probation officer is gathering all this information, here's some things to consider. The information in the report will broadly include the defendant's biographical history, personal attributes that distinguish them from other offenders, such as she has no criminal history, right? It'll include things as well as criminal history, net worth, any other detailed financial information, a description of the life circumstances that may have impacted the defendant's life and decision to engage in the criminal behavior. Like what was going on in Elizabeth Holmes' life? What were the circumstances when she was engaged in this wire fraud, okay, in the criminal behavior? What psychological and mental health status, family history, any drug use, any rehabilitation history. All of those are fair game questions to be asked of Elizabeth Holmes during her interview with the probation department. Additional information could be collected as well, relating to her education, her past and present residences, stating to the probation officer what happened, what did you do, and they'll also be looking for whether or not she accepted responsibility for what happened or not. They'll also possibly collect information regarding the marital status of her parents, what home life was like when she was growing up. Did she still have a relationship with her parents, with her siblings? Looking at the broad brush of her life. Did she experience any problems in the home growing up? What is her marital status currently? Does she have any children? She does have one. I think she's also pregnant, so there are 2 children. What is the status of the children? The whole caretaking role. Again, new moms and new dads and pregnant women are sentenced all the time without a reduction in sentencing, okay? But the court can still consider. It's at their discretion, okay? And I did I think it's in the video regarding Elizabeth Holmes objecting to sentence. Oh no, it's the factors regarding reducing her sentence, possible factors, and it's under loss of caretaker. But because she has a partner, I don't know that she's going to qualify for that because the test is it's an irreplaceable loss of a caregiver. Okay. So you let me know what you think on that. Does she have any professional or vocational licenses, certificates, military history, all of that? They could possibly take a look at. And in the pre-sentence interview, that's her opportunity to meet with the probation officer, usually with her counsel, and she'll identify to them. Usually, this is what defendants do. They make the probation officer aware of any factors in mitigation. What was going on. They explain what happened. They tell their story, and all of that would be, I assume, would be indicated and included in the pre-sentence report that is given to the court. Okay. So they can also submit letters from their family members, letters from friends, letters from colleagues, as well as, the victims can submit statements as well. Okay, so let's get to the 7 factors that the judge considers when sentencing a defendant. The court shall, not may, shall impose a sentence that is sufficient but not greater than what is necessary to comply with the sentencing, okay? Sentencing law, sentencing guidelines. The court, in determining the particular sentence to be imposed, shall consider the following: the nature and circumstances of the offense and the history and characteristics of the defendant, which I just went over with you. The need for the sentence, what's the need for the sentence to be imposed? 1, needs to reflect the seriousness of the offense, to promote respect for the law, and to provide just punishment for the offense, to afford adequate deterrence to deter criminal behavior, to protect the public from further crimes of the defendant, and to provide the defendant with the needed educational, vocational, medical care, correctional treatment, any of that, and to also identify the kinds of sentences available, straight prison, home detention plus prison, home detention, all of that the court could consider. The kinds of sentence and the sentencing ranges established. Now, again, I went over those sentencing ranges. You can look at the sentencing table in the prior videos. And they also consider any pertinent policy statements. Now, I don't know what that's going to be at this point, but factor number 6, the need to avoid unwarranted sentence disparities among defendants. And that's why if you go look at the poll, and please do cast your vote, I indicated some of the recent sentences on similar cases, on fraud cases, that this judge has imposed, right? So you can look at that range and you can vote and make your own analysis of what you think the potential sentencing range could be for Elizabeth Holmes. And the last factor, the need to provide restitution to any of the victims. And again, restitution is separate. Restitution, that means the monetary amount that Elizabeth Holmes could be ordered to pay back to these investors that she defrauded, is different than the amount of loss which establishes the sentencing range. So what if Elizabeth Holmes, had settlements with some of these victims? Well, that only relates, or could be argued, only relates to the restitution, not to the amount of loss, okay? So again, this is all at the judge's discretion. He's the one who determines what the appropriate sentence is. All right, so let me get to your questions because I don't want to run too long here. Where did I put your questions? All right, here we go. So, does the pregnancy reduce? Could it be argued to reduce her sentence? Again, that's up to the judge, but I don't think so. Okay, not in this circumstances of. You can draw your own conclusions. And also, does it qualify under a loss of caretaker? Well, if she has her partner, the father of these children, can she really argue that's an irreplaceable caretaker? So, again, this is up to the judge. All right, another question is, I've been asked, when will Elizabeth Holmes get parole? Well, parole doesn't apply. That was abolished back in the 80s. Okay. They can get some credit, some good time. I'll call them good time credits. I'll do a different video on that when I have a moment. All right. Another question was, will Elizabeth Holmes get home detention? As I said earlier, I don't think so because of the level of fraud. But again, it's at the judge's discretion because these guidelines are not mandatory, they're advisory. I don't think she's going to get home detention. Okay. I don't think, based on what's happened, I don't think so. Here's another question. Can you attend the sentencing? So I was asked by, I think it's Jaku. So thank you very much, Jaku, for subscribing, and I hope I'm saying your name right. But is it a public sentencing? Yes, it's a public sentencing because the courtrooms are public. Okay, so you can attend the sentencing if you want. And by the way, if you're ahead of me in line, at this point, I have a court appearance, but I'm trying to get that resolved. But if I do attend the sentencing and you're ahead of me in line, please save me a seat. Okay, so let's see. Can the court consider those patient counts? I've been asked. Yes, the court can consider it in the amount of loss, and all the conduct, whether it was charged, uncharged, whether she was acquitted or convicted, all of it the court can consider. All right, here's another question. Where can I get a copy of that pre-sentence report? You can't. The pre-sentence reports are confidential, okay? As well as she's looking at possibly 3 years of supervised release after she gets out, and those reports are also confidential. So pre-sentence reports are not available to the public, and in California, unlike some other states, the pre-sentence report is actually given to the defendants. In some other states, they only have the opportunity to inspect. Wow. Okay, so let's see. What about restitution? Is that going to be ordered? So I was asked by, let's see, where is that question? By Hugo. Thank you, Hugo, one of our subscribers. He asked whether or not Holmes has to pay restitution during the appeal process or when the appeal is denied. Great question. So the conviction is not final until the appeal is final. So I would assume that restitution, it may be ordered, but it won't be paid until the appeal is final. Okay. So again, the conviction isn't final until the appeal is final. So here's another question. Will Elizabeth Holmes be remanded into custody at the sentencing? Well, that's up to the judge. The judge can remand a defendant forthwith into custody. It's up to the judge. What's my guess? I think he will. I think he will remand her at the sentencing. So, what do you think? Do you think she's going to be given time? We'll see. All right, what about prior, let's see, do I have any other questions? I think that's it. I think I answered them all. Okay, so here's my final question to you. Do you think Elizabeth Holmes is going to speak at the hearing? I was asked by many reporters, do I think she's going to testify? And I kept saying, yes, she's going to testify in the trial. Yes. And they all shook their heads, or, other people said to me, no, she's not going to take the stand. Well, I think she's going to speak at the hearing, and I'll tell you why. The reason I think she's going to speak at the hearing is because she did not, in my opinion, take responsibility or demonstrate to the court the gravity of the offense when she was on the stand for 7 days testifying. So this is her opportunity. She may have already submitted a written statement. I don't know. That could be included in the pre-sentence report. But I think she's going to speak at the hearing, and we'll see what happens. So you let me know. What do you think? Do you think she's going to speak at the hearing? And again, please do vote in our polls, in our community poll. What kind of sentence do you think Elizabeth Holmes may face? Do you think she's going to talk at the hearing? Do you think the victims are going to show up? Do you think Tyler or Erica will show up? Do you think Dr. Rosendorf is going to show up at the sentencing? Do you think any of these investors will show up at the sentencing? So, if you have any other questions, please do. Submit your questions or your comments, and please do support my work by subscribing. Hit that like button, share these videos, and thank you again. Thank you so much for watching.